left. Anyway, hello everyone, and welcome to PARC Forum. I'm Sonal Chokshi, writer and web producer here at PARC, and co-coordinator of our current forum series on Going Beyond Web 2.0, the power of the web for connecting people, collaboratively co-creating knowledge, enabling organizations to effectively use social computing tools, and more. This is the 15th and final talk in our current speaker series, and next week, we kick off the next rotation of forums with a talk about combining X-ray, fragment screening, and chemi-informatics to discover new drugs. So, throughout the Web 2.0 series, and pardon us, by the way, for the buzz phrase, we're aware that this has an evolving definition, we've had a number of distinguished speakers talk about a variety of topics, and Ed, as part of his talk, will acknowledge some of those topics and speakers as well. And by the way, all of those talks are available online on our website at www.parc.com/forums, F-O-R-U-M-S. But before introducing today's speaker, we actually want to thank all of you for attending the series, for your interest, for your engagement, and especially for your thought-provoking questions. So thank you for that, and we hope you continue to attend the ongoing forums and tell people about it as well. So now on to today's speaker. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Ed Chi, Senior Research Scientist and Area Manager of PARC's Augmented Social Cognition Group, whose work, by the way, can be found at www.parc.com/ASC. Ed completed his BS, MS, and PhD degrees from the University of Minnesota between 1992 and 1999. He has been conducting research on user interface software systems since 1993. His previous work includes understanding information scent, as well as developing information visualizations. He has also worked on computational molecular biology, ubiquitous computing systems, and recommendation and personalized search engines. In his spare time, Ed is an avid Taekwondo black belt, photographer, and snowboarder. So that's just some personal background about him. But before I say anything else, I just want to introduce Ed and welcome him to PARC's first forum for his talk. Thanks.
Okay, so the first thing I should say is that there's many members in the audience that are in my group that I have collaborated with on this research in the last 2 or 3 years, and that includes Peter Paroli, Li Chen-Hung, who are sitting over here. Wave your hands if you are not so shy. And Bangwan Su, who should be back there somewhere, and Les Nelson, not here right now, Rowan Naran, and also we've had a number of alumni, and that I will acknowledge as the research come up. So this speaker series has been called Going Beyond Web 2.0, and we've had a wide variety of different speakers, starting from Ross Mayfield to Garrett Camp from Stumble Upon. We've had Guy Kawasaki here telling us how to build a website and a social media website in $12,000. We've had Bernardo Huberman here talking about the science and the science of the Web 1.0 and how it translates into Web 2.0 research. We've had Andrew McAfee, we've had Kiva.org here, we've had delicious people here. Just a wide variety of different topics that we've touched, both from academia to education to commerce and to politics. And all these different things suggest that this is a really big area and also something that everyone is trying to figure out what's going on. And so in preparation for this talk, I went to Google's image search engine and I typed in Web 2.0 and it says result 1 to 20 of about 1.1 million images. This is not documents, it's images. So people are drawing images, trying to figure out all the different things that are happening around Web 2.0. They have, arrow diagrams and things like that. And of course, I'm going to show you some of those as well. But one of the questions that we're trying to answer here is, what is Web 2.0? And also, the associated question you probably already have had, looking at the title of this talk, what the heck is augmented social cognition? And why are they related and how are they related? So one way to answer that question is to kind of look at the kind of research that we have been doing here at PARC for the last number of 15, 20 years. We used to be in, Peter and I and members of the people that I introduced you to were in this group called User Interface Research. And this group was chiefly involved in this kind of research of a single person sitting in front of screens, or these days, typically multiple screens. In this case, this is my own office, so 6 screens. And maybe we use pretty extreme user interfaces like this weird keyboard that you see in the picture here. And we're on the phone, and it's messy and all that. And I personally have participated in a lot of this research here at PARC. I've been here for about 10 years. And relating to how to build mathematical models of how people search for information, such as information scent work that I did with Peter. Information foraging, how do we actually build foraging tools for people so that they can find information more effectively. And also sense-making, how can we build visual sense-making tools so that people can make sense of large document collections in very efficient ways. And in 10 years of this work, I started to realize that as you do more of this kind of work, we're realizing that people are inherently social, and that these information environments shouldn't just be confined to the analysis of a single person sitting in front of a computer, right? So the truth of this is that people are dying to remix information, okay? And in preparation for this talk, I started looking around in this remix culture that Lawrence Lessig likes to talk about. And by the way, just so that you will pay attention to more forum announcement in the future, we're trying to get him to come and complete sort of this series and talk about some of these issues. But as part of his theory about remix culture, I found this amazing video clip of fan-based construction of Star Trek, the next generation, the next generation. Look at the quality of the production here. There's sound. Props. Even brand new title songs.
Space. Endless. Silent. Waiting. This is the new odyssey of the starship Exeter. Her 5-year mission: to guard the Federation frontier, to patrol uncharted space and scout alien worlds, to brave the darkness of the last vast unknown.
I mean, really impressive work from a bunch of amateurs. And just in case you think that, this sort of things is confined to a very small population, Peter just told me that, because in conjunction with the new release of some of the Raider of the Lost Ark Indiana Jones series, people have been discovering, for example, there was a pair of 2 teenagers when they were 12 years old, they started making a shot-for-shot remake of Raider of the Lost Ark. And in the 6-year span, they've recreated this entire movie and was actually showing in New York to a sold-out audience, right? And other examples of remixing are perhaps more amusing. How many of you were here when the story was told about the Comcast technician? Or at least how many of you know about this? Okay, so about a third of you. So the story is that there is this guy who's been trying to get his Comcast cable modem to work. He just moved into a new dig. And for 3 weeks, he's been without internet, and it's driving him nuts. And so he finally calls Comcast and been negotiating with them over this period of time, and the technician finally comes. And the technician been working on this problem, and while working on the problem, he calls the customer center and discovers that he himself was put on hold for like hours. And he actually fell asleep on his couch. So he made a video of him falling on the couch to the song, I Fell Asleep from Somewhere. And so remixed the song and the video together and uploaded this 1-minute clip onto YouTube, which turned out to be a public relation disaster for Comcast, right? And of course, Comcast very quickly after the uproar of this, after the 1 millionth view of this video, they very quickly fixed this problem. So it's an example of how people are using remix in order to generate not just content, but also take action, And probably the best example of how people are taking action on the internet is Wikipedia. And The upper chart here shows Wikipedia's traffic rank over some period of time. And it shows that from 2003 to 2007, it's grown from 10,000 to about the top 10. And so I think it's right now about top 7, the 7th most trafficked site in the entire world. The bottom graph here, you have red is Wikipedia, and blue is CNN.com. Okay, so it's nice to see, it's amazing to see the X. And what the y-axis is depicting is this concept called daily reach. Daily reach is how many people who are on the net eventually end up on that property. So on average, about 2% of the people end up on CNN.com, whereas about 7% end up on Wikipedia on any given day. Okay. Just for comparison purposes, Google and Yahoo are about 30% each. Okay. So Wikipedia, in its organization of about only 15 people, is able to achieve this in some relatively short period of time. So looking at Wikipedia, one of the things that we were very interested in it from an academic study point of view is how groups are utilizing this system to make sense and share very complex topics and material. Some of them may be on mundane things, at least I would think of them as being mundane things, like for example, Pokemon characters is one of the most well-covered topics for a while on Wikipedia. On the other hand, the debates around the election on Wikipedia is extremely lively and actually very, very informative. So Wikipedia, as it turns out, is a very complex social dynamic site. It has social status. People can achieve administrator's status. They can self-organize into committees. And there are many sites that are like this. So Slashdot is another example. WikiHow, which is a how-to website entirely built on wikis. And also, I'm a big fan of Lost because of the research that we're doing with wikis. And it turns out that there's this amazing site called Lostpedia that essentially chronicles every episode as it is being aired. So you can actually follow the plot on the wiki as people are editing them. And live, they're also coming up with new theories about how things are connected on this, in this plot, in the drama. Very, very close-knit communities coming together trying to solve problems. On the other hand, we also have systems that are more in the middle of this collaboration spectrum, systems that I would characterize, like, for example, Delicious, Flickr, or YouTube, that sort of uses tags or other metadata to try and evolve structures, data structures, that may be used to organize information. So as an example, about 3 years ago, I went to Cambodia. And after I came back, I was just kind of curious as to other people's pictures of Cambodia. And I went to this very special place called Angkor Wat, which is stone temples that were built in the 12th and 13th century in a remote region of Cambodia called Siem Reap. And I went to Flickr and I typed in Cambodia, and lo and behold, it actually came up with 4 different categories. The first category was on the river life. No, actually it's on Angkor Wat, the place that I went to. And then the second categories were around the capital city of Phnom. And then the third one was about the life around the rivers and boats. And finally, sadly, the last cluster is pictures of the killing fields. For those of you who spend some time with history, know that Cambodia was, for a while, under a regime called the Khmer Rouge that killed a lot of people because of political repression. And there are now many monuments that are there. And what Flickr can do is, by looking at the tags, automatically figure out these clusters and present them to the user. So these are systems that sort of can automatically use this information to organize the objects that are there. And then finally, we also have systems that are more on the lightweight end of the social processes. And these are systems like, for example, DIGS. Dig.com uses vote counting as a way to increase the signal to noise ratio, to identify information that are faddish. So the most bookmarked item on Delicious is another example of this. And the origin of this is actually from work that was done in the 1860s about estimating the weight of the ox. It turns out that there was this mathematician who was very interested in these collective averaging processes and went to these farmers markets and discovered that if you actually participate in this game of estimating the weight of an ox for money, that is, if you win, then you get the ox, and you pay $5 to guess. And it turns out that the average of the guess in that room was better than any single guess in that entire room. And it actually came to a very close estimation. And actually, our own stock market works in a very similar way as well, a kind of collective averaging to ascertain the true value of a stock. And to an extent, PageRank or any sort of hub and authority algorithms are a version of this. So one page linking to another page is essentially a vote, and therefore a way to increase the signal to noise ratio. So Google kind of actually is the first Web 2.0 website in the world. So I went through all that as a way to show you a way to think about these systems. You have voting systems on the one end, and then you have collaborative co-creation systems, very high-end collaboration system on the other. And as it turns out that there's a whole bunch of different kinds of research that you can draw from different fields to make a sense of this area. So you have understanding of microeconomics, you have understanding of information and social networks, how information flow between them. Just as an example, there's some work by Anderson and Holt in the 80s about information cascades, which is essentially the rumor mechanism. So how often are information passed from one person to another without being verified? And understanding of conflict and coordination. This is pet problems of social scientists. So how do we measure interference costs, coordination costs, et cetera? So when you have this large group of different kind of research to talk about, how do you pick and choose where to start in order to understand Web 2.0 and how to understand this area? And that brings me to what the research vision for this group was, which was the ability, the definition of cognition. I've been working with two very prominent cognitive scientists at PARC for a long time, and I never bothered to look up the definition of cognition. And when I finally did, I was very glad, because it turns out it has a really beautiful definition, that cognition is the ability to remember, think, and reason, the faculty of knowing. And so by extension, I started thinking about, we as a group started thinking about what is social cognition. And then I was alerted to the fact that actually social cognition has been a term in existing usage in psychology for a while. And typically what the term social cognition refers to is the individual's cognition processes around social relationships. So let me give you an example. Basically, imagine that you're a 13-year-old girl in some junior high school, and you say, you know what, Mary is the most popular girl in town, and Jessica is a really good friend with Mary, so if I spend more time with Jessica, then maybe Mary will like me, and maybe I can get to know Mary better. That's an example. That thought pattern is an example of what people have traditionally called social cognition. But I actually think that's a pretty narrow definition of what social cognition could mean. So we define social cognition as the ability of a group of people to remember, think, and reason. So by extension, now you probably have some idea of what augmented social cognition means. Supported by systems, how do you actually enhance a group of people to remember, think, and reason? And that's what we're trying to do. And in the process of trying to understand any new areas like this, I argue that what you need to do is participate in the following 4 activities. You got to do some sort of characterization of what's going on, the behavior that's there. Then you got to build some models of those behaviors. And then once you have those models, being in a technical research center like this, what you want to do is actually build systems and then test those systems in the real world. so the prototyping. And then once you have those prototypes, you actually want to do some evaluation to see whether your prototypes actually worked. So let's go through some example of that. So characterization. There used to be a really colorful, interesting mathematician that used to consult for us here at PARC in the late 80s and early 90s when I wasn't here. But he's fond of saying that the first step in solving any interesting problem is to get some really big pieces of paper and get some pencil, okay? So the idea here is that you basically just want to find out what is the data and what does it look like, and if there's any way of making sense of it. And so as an example of that, we recently was very interested in social search. And the problem is that nobody really understands how social search really works in the wild. And so what we did was we went and actually used Mechanical Turk. How many of you know what Mechanical Turk is? Good portion of it. So I won't explain what it is, but basically we used Mechanical Turk to do a very wide survey. We got some 200 people to give us critical instances of how they actually use a search engine to find some piece of information. And then you can start actually building models. And we basically started with paper, and we started drawing models of what it looks like, what are people doing. So it turns out that about 31.1% of the time, when you look at the query log, if you just see the keywords, you would have thought that that was an individual act. But it turns out that 31.3% of the time, at least in our survey, that a lot of these tasks were coming from somebody else. So for example, it could be a request for information from a customer, from a client, from a boss. And then the other 68% of the time, they're coming from internal prompts. So some sort of internal generated, oh, all of a sudden I got interested in something and I want to go look at that, right? So that is already somewhat social, that a lot of the requests are social in itself. And it turns out that the gathering of requirements is also a very social activity. So a lot of times that people actually talk to other people to find out what keywords to use to find something. So when Peter and I were talking about these remixing of these films as an example, he said, how did you find that? And I say, just go on Google and type Star Trek fan films, right? So that's a cue to him about how to find that piece of information. And that was a social act of exchange, right? So that's an example of gathering requirement and formulating the representation of the space based upon other people's information. And then it turns out that there's 3 different types of search behavior: informational search, navigational search versus transactional search. And majority of the time, 60% of the time, people are engaged in informational search. And that's the part of informational search is kind of like exploratory, and they're doing a lot more foraging. But what's perhaps more interesting is that after they do their search, the search product, actually 72% of the time, people actually share that with somebody else. They actually do something with it. So for example, a vast majority of them actually organize them. So this is where Delicious comes in, right? So people can use a social bookmarking system like this to start actually organize all the different material that they found. But actually, a good percentage of these people, 67% of the people, also engage in some sort of distribution act. So they either email it to somebody, they might call somebody up, or they may actually publish it somewhere on their blog, for example. So we had, just giving you an example of an interesting story. We had one barista, so a person who makes coffee drinks. I don't know at what coffee company, maybe at Starbucks, I don't know. But there was some drink that a customer had asked for, and he didn't know how to make it. So he asked his colleagues, how do I make this particular recipe? And they said, well, I only know that there's these ingredients in it, but that's all I know. So he gathers that requirement, goes to Google, puts in those requirements, and finds the recipe, right? And then when he finally finds the recipe, he actually emails that to his coworkers so that they now know how to make this particular drink. So if you're at Google, you're sitting there just looking at the query log, you see an individual query action. You don't see the fact that it's a very social based activity. So this is an example of the kind of characterization work that we've been doing. And another thing that we've been trying to understand more is these Wikipedia. So let me play you a little clip.
Wikipedia is the best thing ever. Anyone in the world can write anything they want about any subject. So you know you are getting the best possible information.
What is really great about this clip is that there's something true in there that we all like to believe is true because there's democracy or there's some sort of wisdom of the crowd going on in Wikipedia. On the other hand, there's something really strangely wrong about that. The fact that anybody can write anything, so how do you know that it's the best information? It can't be because you have a lot of people who are trying to lead you astray, right? So one of the things that we've been doing is characterization of coordination actions in Wikipedia in order to understand whether there really is a wisdom of the crowd going on in Wikipedia. So here is an example of a graph that we constructed. It turns out that if you characterize all the different edits that are in Wikipedia, in light green here, these are all the edits that goes toward actual article edits. That is, they're actually moving the system forward by evolving the article. Whereas the darker green here is people talking about that article talk. And then in cyan color here, labeled as user, these are basically home pages, people working on their home pages. So this is a little fact about Wikipedia is that you can actually construct a home page there, and kind of like MySpace, you can put anything you want up there. And then there's this darker blue here, which is people talking to each other. This is one way of essentially sending email to each other if you're on Wikipedia. And you can see that it's been increasing since the beginning of Wikipedia. And then there's maintenance. This is like fighting vandalism and dealing with spam and whatnot. And then there's this category that I have labeled. And what does other mean? Well, it turns out that it's all about the maintenance of social order in Wikipedia. So for example, procedural pages. What happens when two people keep reverting each other? Well, it turns out there's this rule called the 3 revert rule. Just like in chess, you can't make the same moves 3 times. Otherwise, you both essentially have to forfeit the game. It's a draw. There's a similar rule like that in Wikipedia. And those are codified in these procedural pages. So that's an example of another kind of characterization that we're doing. So let me tell you a little bit about the kind of modeling that we're doing also in Wikipedia. One thing that we did was we were very interested in understanding how controversy evolves in Wikipedia. And we came up with this concept called a controversial revision count. The idea is that how do you actually quantify how much conflict is in a particular topic area? So for example, you have some area like abortion, right? And you want to find out, is abortion more controversial than, say, right to life, or more controversial than, say, Hillary Clinton? You want to pick one of those topics like that. How do you actually measure that so that you can compare? Well, we came up with this concept called controversial revision count, which is basically if you have Article 1 and 2, and Article 1 has been marked as being controversial during its revision history, say, for example, 8 times, whereas Article 2 has only been marked twice, you can go through the log and count this up. And then we sort of, as a rough measure, we would argue that Article 1 is more controversial than Article 2. Just kind of a very rough measure of what's controversial. And then we basically, I don't have time to go through every single one of these, but metrics like, for example, can we use the number of revision to that article to predict its controversialness? Can we figure out how many anonymous edits to that article will, the more anonymous edits maybe will contribute to more controversy, right? So we have all these different metrics that we basically computed, and then we ran a regression and we built a SVM, a support vector machine. This is mathematical speak now. But we basically built this machine learning system to try and predict what articles are controversial. And it turns out that you can actually build pretty good machines to do this prediction if you have all these metrics to compute over. And by the way, when we plotted this, we can't help but wonder, what is that dot all the way out there as an outlier? And I was like, well, I started scratching my head. I was thinking maybe it's abortion, maybe it's religion, maybe it's politics, maybe it's presidential politics. I don't know. How many of you have a good guess on what that dot is? Just, order of magnitude. Britney Spears, that's a good guess. Anyone want to venture a guess? No? Well, it turns out that it's all the different things that I mentioned rolled into one, and that's George Bush. So there's, when I saw that, that was when I know that our model really worked, right? So this is another example of the kind of model system that you can build. We've also been doing some work on characterizing the navigability of tagging systems. So let me give you an example here of some work I did with Todd Mikovits. We started thinking about social tagging systems, and one of the things that we realized is that you have documents, and they're about some set of topics. You have users, and they're about some set of concepts. And essentially what people are doing is they're encoding these topics into tags. And then on the other end, when you want to retrieve it, there's kind of a decoding process. So you type in some keywords in order to get the information that you're interested in. And this is an imperfect process, right? People are going to spam you. They're going to add noise to the system and whatnot. And so how do you try and understand a system like this? Well, it turns out that there's when you pose the question in that particular way, you can use information theory to do this, right? So information theory has this concept called entropy, which measures the uncertainty about a particular event associated with some probability distribution. So for those of you who are not as mathematical, the only thing that you need to remember from this slide is that entropy measures uncertainty. So the higher the number, the more uncertainty there is, okay? So what we did essentially was we went and crawled Delicious and started plotting these entropy plots. And what we found was that, for example, that if you're sitting there and you're Delicious and you're watching these tags come through the users, and you're discovering that it's harder and harder for you to predict what the next tag will be because it's increasing. The other concept that is very interesting is that there's this associated concept to entropy called conditional entropy, which is the idea that if you know all the information there is to know about tags, and you want to find out what is the uncertainty in some other distribution. So in this case, assuming that I know all the information there is to know about tags, I know how people are using them, etc. And now I want to find out what is the uncertainty there are in knowing what the next document will be. And so this is kind of the navigability problem. And what you find is that over time, even if you know all the tags in the system and you know how they're distributed, etc., it's still very hard for you to predict what the next document will come through, right? So the entropy for that is also increasing. And if both of those are still slightly fuzzy, probably the best metric to show here is this concept called mutual information. The idea that there's two probabilities distribution, and you want to find out how much common information do they share. And when you measure that, the mutual information between those two probability distributions, you find out that actually the mutual information in social tagging systems like Delicious is actually decreasing. So what does this tell you? It tells you that, first of all, you can use this information theory method to measure social tagging systems. And secondly, by looking at the trends in this mutual information, essentially you can characterize how these social systems are evolving. So as a map, what the data that we have here seems to suggest is that social tagging systems seems to be losing their ability over time to guide users efficiently to the information that they're interested in. And so now the question is there some way in which we can deal with this problem, this pressure? So in the remaining 10, 15 minutes I have, I'm going to show you some answers to these problems. So once you can build these models, and then what can you do? So one of the things that we're doing here at PARC is this concept called living laboratory. So the idea is that we're going to actually prototype these social applications, and we're actually going to put them out there on the web, and any of you can actually go and use them and try them out. So we're just starting some of that, and I'll show you some example of that. One system that we're building is this system called Mr. Taggy. And here, let me switch to a live browser. So it's always dangerous to do a live demo, but here it is. So this is Mr. Taggy, and it's not quite live for everybody to use yet, but hopefully real soon. But as an example, if we say, for example, Web 2.0, you actually go to the website here, and it tells you that Web 2.0 is related to keywords like web, tools, Ajax, blogs, social. So let's say, for example, I think social is really important and interesting keyword. And then I can click on social here, and maybe I'm interested in social networking. And then as I give feedback to the system about what keywords I'm interested in, for example, social graph, that sounds interesting. And the Google API, well, maybe blogging. So as I add more keyword, you can see that the system is responding to what I've indicated as being interesting, and it's actually live trying to update and tell me what new sources I may be interested in looking at. So this is a system that we built over the last year and a half or so. So let's try another example. So for example, health. Actually, I think I remember another really good example that I liked, which was fitness. So let's say you type in the keyword fitness, and it says health, exercise, diet, food. And so let's say, for example, I'm interested in diet. And then you may be wondering, so health, food, exercise, nutrition, that's related, nutrition. And life hacks, what is that? Well, it turns out that there's this website called Life Hacks, which is a bunch of geeks that are very interested in hacking their own life. How do I make my life more efficient? And this website is called Life Hacks. And so that's why this keyword is related. So let's say I'm a geek and I'm interested in that, and then I pick that keyword. And very quickly now I have a bunch of results here that are all about nutrition and fitness and diet. This is searching over the delicious data set. So this is an example of the kind of living laboratory system that we're building. Another system that we're building, this is one that you can actually try out yourself. It's called Wiki Dashboard. So what we did here is we downloaded an entire copy of Wikipedia, every single revision. How many revisions are there now, Bawan? 180. About 180 million revisions, and I think it now takes about 3.5 terabytes to store on our servers. It's amazing. You can just go down to Fry's and buy 7 drives, and then it fits. The problem, as it turns out, is downloading the data. It took us, I think, 3 days just to download the data, and then another 3 days just to uncompress it, and then another about 3 months just to load it all into a database. So I mean, there's a lot of work behind it other than just the hard drive. But we can actually search for any topic here. So let's say, for example, Obama. So you can go to Obama's page, and what it does is it actually pulls back the Obama page, and you can see that this is the live Wikipedia with the articles in it. And in addition, you notice that we have what we call a visualization on top of this page. And what this visualization actually shows you is editing pattern, the social patterns around this particular page. So you can make some decision about whether you should trust this page. So for example, you find out that this page has been heavily edited by a guy named Hailfire, And he's edited 1,233 edits, which is about 15.3% of all the edits ever made on this particular page. And not only that, you see that from this time graph here, that he's been editing this page pretty much up until the last minute I just loaded this page, right? I mean, he's very active. And in fact, you can see there's a little break in the system here. I suspect that this little bar up here correspond to the Reverend Wright controversy. So now you can actually click on this user, and you get this is a user interface technique called pivot browsing. So the idea is that before we were looking at a topic and we were seeing what the top users are, but now when I click on that user, what I actually get is a set of topic that user is interested in. So you find out that Hailfire is interested in Obama quite a bit. He's interested in the Illinois United States Senate election. So he's really heavily into the Illinois politics, right? So, and then finally you get down here and you see there's some other examples. So compare this to Hillary Clinton's page, for example, one of the more interesting comparisons going on these days. You see a very similar pattern here. You see that you have with the time R, 1154. So now you question, looking at Wikipedia, and these kinds of social patterns, are these the kind of pages that you may want to pay attention to? You know, do you worry about the fact that one person may be dominating the conversation here? So the idea here is social transparency. We give you the data so that you can make decisions yourself about the trustworthiness of the information, right? So that's another example. And then finally, we have a third system that we're working on that's called Spartacus. And this system, the idea here is that, let's say, for example, I'm on the Hillary Clinton page here. And if you are used to using Delicious, one thing that you may do is you click on the Post to Delicious link, and then now you go there, and then you say, okay, well, it was about Clinton, Hillary. I finally remember how to spell her name. And then you're interested in the fact that she's from New York and senator. And you press save, and you're brought back to the original page. You can see that this is, on the order of about 10 seconds of interaction, and assuming you know how to type, and if you don't know how to type, most people do these days. But there's just a lot of interaction costs. So one of the things that we're interested in looking at is if you lower the interaction costs with these social Web 2.0 systems, can you actually get more people to participate? So we have this system, Spartacus, where you're reading. So let's say, for example, airlines are slowing down flight to save on fuel. Drivers have long known that slowing down on the highway means getting more miles to the gallon. So you can highlight it, and so you know highway, airlines, flights, and click save. Now I've tagged this page with those keywords. Okay. So here it says Southwest started flying slower about 2 months ago. So now maybe I'm interested in the fact that this is Southwest Airlines, so I click on that. And it will save $42 million in fuel this year. And I can come down here and I find out there's United, how much they're expecting to pay. So I'll click on that. Yes, so this is a browser plugin that we've created. And so now if you go to, so here, I forgot to do this. I could also go to, for example, a friend of mine's and find out what he has been interested in reading, right? So we go to their page and let's see. Danger of doing live demos. There you go. I probably shouldn't be reloading 2 pages at the same time. But so here is an example of, I can actually look at one of my staff members and figure out what he has been reading in, and actually where the fact that, oh, this is interesting, we actually collided on the same paragraph and have made annotation on the same paragraph. And so it actually shows my tags as well as his tags, and as well as both of our highlights, so we can actually pay attention to the same area of the page. And then I can look at my own reading notebook, all the different paragraphs I've read in the last little while, as well as your standard, tag cloud to get a sense of what I'd be interested in. So one of which is Google, and Notch, which is an open source project, and social, and tagging, and Tibet, and Wikipedia. So it'll give you a sense of what I've been interested in by looking at that tag cloud. Okay. So I'm kind of coming to an end to what I have to say, but let me conclude by saying a few things that may be interesting. One issue here is that I have not told you anything about evaluation yet. There's two reasons for that. First is that I don't have time. It's very hard to do a 45-minute talk and you want to talk about all these different things. But we actually have people from my group that are actually in the audience that are working on this problem. Some German students that we have that are coming here and working on evaluations of these systems. So as an example, Raluca, who was a staff member in our group last year, actually did an analysis of click-to-tag, the system that I just showed you, the ability to just pick out keywords from the web pages and tag them. And it turns out that you might wonder that, well, the fact that they don't have to type it in, maybe they won't remember as well because they're not actually encoding. They're not doing something more substantial. As it turns out that their memory effects are very similar between the two systems. So there's no loss in terms of encoding. So these are the kinds of research that we're doing in evaluation that I don't have time to talk about. So there's this issue about the fact that there's sort of two sides to tagging. On the one side, you have this encoding question, which is how well people are sort of encoding information into these set of keywords. And then on the other, which is this retrieval question. Given a set of keywords, are people really able to get back to the information they want? And depending on the kind of social tagging system that you're building, how efficient is this process? So that's something that we're essentially trying to study in this research. So that sort of starts to conclude our entire series. So we cover a lot of different topics so far. We've had Ross Mayfield here talking about Wikis. We had the creators of Stumble Upon, Garrett Camp here talking about how that system has grown from 0 users in his apartment to 5 million users. In fact, they're having a party this month on celebrating that, having the 5 millionth user on their system. And then we've had people like Sharon Lee from Forrester talking about how to actually understand social media and use of it in enterprises. Then we've had Guy Kawasaki, which I mentioned before. We've had Bernardo Huberman talking about the science of this. We've had BJ Fogg talking about Facebook, visualization, social visualization from Fernanda Villegas and Martin Wittenberg, Kiva.org, Prima Shah. We've had Andrew McAfee, Harvard professor here, talking about how Web 2.0 systems are affecting the enterprise. We've had Delicious coming here, giving us a sneak peek of what the future of their system is going to look like. We've had Lisa Pedridis, who was here talking about the effect of Web 2.0 on education systems. And then we've had 2 weeks ago, we have people from the semantic web movement here talking about how that's going to affect Web 2.0 in the future. And then finally, there's this last talk sort of trying to bring it all together. So part of this, going through all these different topics is this question of what are the appropriate questions to ask when you're trying to understand a field like this. So this morning when I woke up, I started thinking about all the different kinds of questions that people could ask and try and study around augmented social cognition. Things like, for example, crowdsourcing, collaborative co-creation. Is there a wisdom of the crowd in Wikipedia? This is something that we're actually trying to find out right now. Bang1 is leading that effort, and we're trying to figure out the churn rate. Is there a renewal of editors in Wikipedia? So that's an example. Collective intelligence, folksonomy. Are social tags really getting more and more useful over time for the organization of a large document collection like the web? Or maybe they're more applicable to a small group. Things like, for example, collective averaging and social attention. Do voting system really can identify the best quality and the most interesting information for that community? Or is there a better process than the voting systems? Participation architecture, AJAX systems. There is this belief that if we make system more interactive, people will be more productive. Well, is that really true? Does lowering the interaction cost barriers actually increase participation and actually increase productivity? Expertise finding. We have this hypothesis that if people are connected in social networks, then getting experts through the social network, first of all, will be easy. And secondly, the information that you will get will actually be better. And thirdly, you will get the information actually faster. Well, are all those questions really true? And we don't know. So that's why we're trying to, get into this area and trying to understand what does it take to really get beyond the buzzword of Web 2.0? How do we get beyond just understanding by experimentation? Can we actually build science? Can we actually build systems? Can we actually build models of how to understand this space? So to conclude, augmented social cognition is about understanding how social computing systems can enhance the ability of a group of people to remember, think, and reason. And we're doing this by using this concept called living laboratory, by actually creating applications that hopefully some of you will actually eventually spend some time with and check them out, and using these applications to actually harness these collective intelligence processes to improve knowledge capture, transfer, and discovery. And there's my contact info. And thank you very much, and I'll probably have some time to take some questions. Thank you. Yes?
I have two questions. The first question is about the entropy. The entropy results, you said there are ways basically to address the increasing based on uncertainty of social tagging over time. So I'm wondering if you could articulate what those methods are. The second question is about evaluation, specifically in terms of your definition here of augmented social cognition. I can see how you might evaluate memory, right? People's ability to use these systems or groups to evaluate whether or not they can remember things better. How are you evaluating their ability to think and reason?
So I'll take the harder question first. I always believe in taking the harder option first. How do you actually measure that they're actually thinking and reasoning more productively? So as an example, we're conducting a study right now. Is Christopher? Yeah, Christopher is in the back there. So if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about this, you can talk to him. We're using Spartacus, for example, to find out that if we have a topic area and we have a group of people who are using, just let's say, for example, just Google and Microsoft Word and whatever note-taking tools they might want to use, that's one group of people. And another group of people, they're going to use Spartacus. They're going to use Spartacus to tag the information. They're going to use it to share information with each other. And now the question is, who can actually create a better report at the end of that time period, say a week or 5 hours or wherever it is? Do they actually gather more information because they're socially interacting with other people and exchanging what information there is? Or do they actually, does the overhead of interacting with other people actually decrease their performance? So we basically have a very classic learning experiment. At the beginning, we test to see how much information do they know, how much knowledge do they know in a particular domain area. And then they go through this learning period. And then at the end of that, we give them another exam to test them how well they actually score on that exam, depending on whether they had the social tool or not. So that's an example of how you could actually figure out if they're actually thinking and reasoning more productively, right? So that's the kind of evaluation that we're talking about. Now, in terms of your first question about the actual method that we use for the entropy analysis, that paper is just about to be published in the Hypertext Conference. And if you email me, I'd be happy to send you the detail. But I didn't have enough time to go through all the little details in that analysis, but that is being published in June. Yeah. So.
Hosting a great series of speakers. Please do it again. And I heard your comments with a lot of, I took some notes. One comment I have is there are tons of news reports, tons of edits, tons of people's comments, but there's not much analysis. I'll give you an example. For instance, if I want information or an analysis on Reverend Wright, I could find Dick, I could go to Yahoo, I could go to Wikipedia, but where do I go for analysis? And I still have to turn to New York Times if they ever write an editorial.
Yes, right. So Wikipedia certainly has an answer to this, right? I'm sure if you go on Wikipedia and you search for Reverend Jeremiah Wright, you will probably find a very comprehensive article. And if it's not there, check back in another week. There will be even more comprehensive, right? I mean, that's the amazing thing about Wikipedia. And one question you might ask is, does the Wikipedia process, is that better than the New York Times process, right? So that's the traditional media versus the new media question, whether there's crowdsourcing and wisdom of the crowd question here. One thing that people have argued is that in Wikipedia, you know that a lot of people have looked at this article, and if they're so inclined, they can always correct the problem theirs, and therefore going back to Steve Carell's comment from the show The Office, right? You're getting the best information possible because anybody can edit that article, right? So is that true? So that's actually something we're looking at in the research. Is there a way to quantify the quality of the information as well as the trustworthiness of the information? And that's the reason why we were interested in having BJ Fogg here, because he's done a lot of work on persuasion technology and credibility research, et cetera. And so we're starting to do some of that research as well around Wikipedia, and we have some we just published a paper in the CHI conference on the wiki dashboard method, the idea that you make the social dynamic data available so that people can make decisions on their own about the trustworthiness of the information. Right. As soon as we touch upon this, it seems that multiple hands goes up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, analysis is subjective by its nature, and if you don't go on and show the viewpoint or the filter that you're doing the analysis through, it doesn't work that well. Generally, I go to Wikipedia for objective information. People don't generally argue about the force of gravity, the equations behind it. I may have forgotten them, but I can go on and look them up again. There isn't a lot of controversy there. For stuff which is history in the making, there's just a bunch of torn up dirt. And as a result, analysis is very difficult. You have to pick the filter you want to see it through.
Yeah, and that has definitely been a common criticism of Wikipedia in the sense that you can imagine a lot of the activities on there are really not that encyclopedic. On the other hand, knowledge that you would expect to be fact and that should be recorded in encyclopedias often are actually controversial themselves. So for example, who is the inventor of the radio? If you talk to Americans, it's an American inventor. If you talk to Italians, it's an Italian inventor. So who is right, okay? Are we gonna get to the point where the Italian version of the Wikipedia says one thing and the English version of the Wikipedia is gonna say another? That certainly should. Well, so that's the question. Where do we arrive at? And so one of the issues that we're trying to understand here is this consensus processes. So how does a group of people actually arrive at consensus, and at what point, at what threshold, as a society, we decide that now that is fact and this is not, right? And that's a really tricky issue. In fact, I just stepped out of a meeting at 2:30 where we talked about this problem in the gray shirt.
Regarding that, the only study that I was aware of so far, I'm sure there are, the accuracy of Wikipedia was done by Nature magazine.
Right.
They sampled, spot checked, presumably technical articles, not political articles, et cetera, and found that it was comparable to, I think, Encyclopedia Britannica on factuality, but worse in terms of writing, writing level. The writing, the grammar, etc. The actual writing was not as good. But what I actually was doing was wanted to say is that my impression, all these incredible techniques that you've outlined in this series, it seems to go totally against what the establishment is reacting in the most negative way to what is the most incredible blossoming of citizen participation and citizen empowerment. I mean, Bush administration is the tightest. They do not, I mean, imagine if there was a collaborative technique, if they had asked, how should we find Osama bin Laden, something like that, or whatever. I mean, even if it was filled with controversy, you have hundreds of millions of people assisting in what is regarded as one of the enormous problems right now. Instead, they close it down. Also, in terms of the journalism, you look at the blogosphere. There is incredible, rich. Of course, there's a sea of nonsense, but there always is. But there's this incredibly rich and well-reasoned arguments, which are only shoved into the mainstream media by the force of the blogosphere.
So one of the things that we've been trying to understand as part of our research is how do these Web 2.0 systems apply in enterprises, for example. In enterprises, a lot of time it's very hierarchical. There's a lot of top-down control, and Ross Mayfield, for example, spoke a lot about this conflict that happens when top-down processes and bottom-up processes that are being championed by Web 2.0 technology come to a head. And we have had that struggle here at PARC ourselves. So, for example, how do we deal with individual contributors in our lab who want to blog? A couple of years ago, there's the famous case of the Google blogger who got himself in trouble by blogging about things that he shouldn't. And so there's this whole issue about how does social norm develop around these new social media that in a way, I think you were kind of alluding to. And I don't think that there's some element of this is a technology problem. Some element of it is actually a social engineering problem, which is that in the establishment of social norms about how to deal with bottom-up information, for example, is still evolving. So I know.
Attempt to protect power. Actually, it's a very overt reaction to retain power.
Well, and that's a very interesting viewpoint because we've been looking at Wikipedia, for example, to see whether there is a cabal, essentially, that is very interested in protecting their own power. Exactly. Exactly. And so that was something that we're looking at. So it turns out that this research really interacts with sociology and especially on theories of social stratification, which I've been reading a little bit about, like Max Weber's work and et cetera. So, it's a very, very tough question that you asked, but, hopefully in the next couple of years, we'll start to shed some light on what you're saying. I'll take, this one.
So to sum up,
What would you say would be the largest amount of value at a personal level and a societal level for all that you've talked about in this series of Web 2.0? What is your vision of value creation?
Well, as I mentioned, our intellectual heritage, at least the group that I'm in, was originally from user interface research. So what that meant was that in the beginning, we're very much focused on the individual benefit. So the fact that you now go to Google and you search for some topic, like for example, radio that we were just talking about. And there will be a Wikipedia article on it, and it tells you a lot about the history of the radio, et cetera. And that really, really enhances your individual work, right? I mean, previously this was very difficult. We also had another example where I was kind of struck by how easy it is now. I was trying to find these remix example, right? And I just go on YouTube and I type in, Star Trek fan films, and there it is, right? I mean, imagine before YouTube, the thing that you would have to do is probably go to your local library, try and see if they have it, and if they don't have it, you have to go through interlibrary loan, and so the whole point about YouTube is not that, view from a technology point of view, is that it's pretty simple, right? I mean, it's just video upload site, it does some transcoding, and then people can download it, right? But actually, the social effect is quite profound, which is that, people with their own video cameras back in the 80s have all these, obscure things. So for example, if you wanted to find the 1984 commercial from Apple, right, the famous one, right? Before, you probably have to go through quite a bit of pain to find that. But now you go on YouTube, it's probably there. And so the access to information from an individual point of view, I argue, has been tremendous. Now, in terms of the societal benefit, now the question I think you asked there is quite deep, actually, because there's this philosophical point about the fact that when information is more democratic, that is, when information is a lot more accessible by a wide group of people, it has been argued that it actually increases social mobility. That is, it actually betters the society by enabling more lower stratification of the society access to knowledge, which then enable them to move upwards, right? And so, is that really happening? Does Wikipedia have it actually enabled poor school district better access to information because they can't afford encyclopedic information like Britannica? That's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that, but I think a lot of people are very excited about this area because they believe that that is true. That by making information more democratic, by making it more freely available, that it will actually increase social mobility and actually better the society. And I personally believe that that's true. So we'll take one more in front. Sono, is that okay? Two more, okay.
Well, 2 points. I don't think the lower income people have access. A lot of people I know about is that older people, they don't know how to turn their computer on, let alone do anything else with it. The other part was Wikipedia. I'm considered an expert in a certain area, and every time I try to edit the page in that area, I'm told I'm being self-serving, and they cut it all out, all the edits I make. And it's quite full of errors and omissions and what have you.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of going like, no, everybody is not allowed. And I asked the fellow who was getting mad at me, I said, well, do you know who I am? I mean, it'd be like if you were trying to fix something from, about Ed Sheehan and this sort of stuff to somebody who didn't know who you were, and you couldn't prove that you were an expert in this field.
Right.
It's very, very frustrating because Wikipedia will not. If somebody else could go in who didn't know you and edit something about you and just say anything they want to, and they can get the edit in Wikipedia, but you can't go in and put an accurate statement about yourself. They don't allow you to do that. That's self-serving.
Right.
So it becomes sort of a, in other words, Obama couldn't go on his own page and fix something.
Well, the interesting thing about Wikipedia and why it's so fascinating is that that's why I love that clip, right? Anybody can edit anything, but that doesn't mean that the social effect of censorship isn't still there, right? So what's in
Wikipedia, there's not a lot.
Well, and actually that, I can't go into all the little details about the kind of research that we've done, but let me tell you, that's actually a social effect. A lot of people are experiencing that. You're not alone. I've experienced the same thing. And there's policies about no original research. There's policies about that you can't edit articles about yourself, for example, on Wikipedia. So there's a lot of policies around, especially biographies of living persons is a really big policy issue on Wikipedia. So anyways, the point is that that I was trying to get to is that Wikipedia has been a giant experiment. If 10 years ago someone came to you and said, okay, you know what, I got this interesting idea where I'm going to create a collaborative hypertext system on the web, and we're going to get everybody in the world to come and edit this thing, and we're going to make knowledge available to everybody. 10 years ago, I would have laughed at that person and said, you're insane. It's never going to happen. Why would that happen? And Wikipedia has proved everyone to be wrong about that. But I think the story hasn't ended. People act as if Wikipedia is the end-all and be-all, but I don't think that's the case. I think there's actually more to the story. And so one of the things that we're doing, in fact, just literally research hot off the press this week, Bangwan has done. We've been doing this thing called pyramid analysis. We're trying to analyze the social mobility, the people moving between essentially power classes within Wikipedia. And we're finding actually that there may be an entrenched power structure within Wikipedia that is not really on the surface of the system. And your experience of being censored, essentially, is potentially an effect of that. But we're just starting to learn more about this, and so that's not conclusive evidence. So we hope to learn more about whether there is really an easy way for people to move across user classes in Wikipedia. So we don't know the answer to that yet. So I'm going to take. Wow. Okay. I think people are actually taking off. So we'll end it now, or.
Right. You guys can come up and ask questions. We have to close the auditorium at 5:30, so you're welcome to stay and ask questions. But you should definitely wrap.
So thank you very much.